The real estate market in November here in Ocean City was a little bit crazy. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened and project out into the future with what I think is coming down the pipe. Let's go. If this is the first time you're joining me for a market update, let me walk you through how we do this. So we start with history, where we came from before we look at a lot of charts. We're talking visualization so you can see what is happening. And then we will talk about projections because that's what most people are most curious about. And that's usually the questions I get most frequently. So let's dive in and we're going to talk about exactly where we were. So mortgage rates have been on a bit of a wild ride, not just for the last month, but for the entire year. So we obviously were back in the threes when we started in 2022, quickly ramped up into the fives once summer came around, and then we went all the way up above 7. Good news, though. They are down from 7.25 down to about 6.5, depending on the lender you're talking to, and obviously depending on your qualifications. But in good news, they did come down. Now, I don't expect them to continue coming downward at this point. Mortgage experts in the field seem to agree with that sentiment. Obviously, we're going to know a whole lot more coming up here in the coming weeks with what the Fed announces next in terms of their next interest rate, their prime rate increase. If it's only 50 basis points, that's hopefully not going to change a whole lot. If they do another 75 basis point change, I would expect they go up, and I don't see it being less than 50. So I think we're going to stay right about there for the foreseeable future. But inventory is the biggest piece of this entire puzzle. Let me explain why, and I have in the past, but there's a little tweak on it now because we were ramping up, and I had been keen on this. If and when we crossed 300 properties available on the market, we would start to see some pressure on prices to come downwards. Now, we did see 300 in October at one point, about mid-month, but we actually ended lower than that when the end of the month came. Since then, we dropped another 3% down to 286 properties. So things seem to be trending down. And this time of year, that's totally normal. Last year, from October through January of 2022, inventory actually came down about 40%, which is crazy. I don't expect to see that this year, but still, if we're going to start to trend slowly downwards like we do every year this time of year, I don't expect really a whole lot to be impacted on that front. If we see next month we have a spike in inventory that goes completely counter to our trends, historically, that is a different story. Now, low days on market are starting to increase, and you're going to see a difference here between our single family world and our condo world. And it's very, very stark difference. Now, with prices, they're still very stable. We were 9% year over year last month for condos, and we are there once again in November. Single family, same thing. We were 46% year over year last month. Now we're 45% year over year. So prices are not showing any signs of really slowing down. But with that said, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit later, right? High-priced homes are still selling. They seem to be selling more quickly than the under $1 million homes. There are a variety of reasons for why that might be. But again, if inventory is rising in that segment of the sub-$1 million category, I would expect there to be more price pressures there than the rest of the market. Now, here's where we get to the fun. One thing that I want to stress about this pending sales graph. So blue is the November for the last 4 years. If you're just looking at the blue, right, you see, okay, yes, we're trending downwards. If you look in any general direction or trend line, we are going downwards. But yes, we had a abysmally low total pending number. The only time it's lower in the last several years has been April of 2020 when COVID began. We only crossed that threshold by a couple properties. But there's some comfort in this. And that may sound counterintuitive, but if you not only look at the blue bars when they're in November, if you look where we came from in October, for the last 4 years, we had on average about a 30% decrease in number of homes under contract in October to number of homes that went under contract in November. Once again, we're at 28% decrease. So I'm not going to sell that as more than a, hey, this doesn't scare me as much as it would if I didn't have the context. That's the only thing that I want you to walk away with from this graph is, yes, we are trending downwards in activity, but this is normal. It's not like everybody gave up in the month of October. So that is where we are with pending sales. Now, as for closed sales, shockingly flat. Now, I would expect that there is a slight increase over the coming days. There are still 14 properties that should have closed by now in the MLS that have not been marked as sold. So I can't factor any of that data into the equation, into any of the statistics that are going on here. So I'm hopeful that there's not going to be a huge change, but I know I did talk to a couple of these agents. Some of the new builds that were scheduled to close this month are actually being extended. So there's going to be some extra lag here. And I didn't want to hold off on putting this video out because who knows when these agents are going to get off their butts and click the dang buttons and put the information in the MLS so we can run our numbers. But we are seeing here, again, sold closely tracks with what was pending over the prior few months. So if I flip backwards real quick, right, pending in general is trending down, we would expect sold to do the same. So if this were to be consistent over a 12-month period, right, if we're sub 50 sales per year, this would put us by far at the lowest volume in a 12-month calendar year since 2010 at least. And that's a totally different world pre-2010. So let's talk about single families versus condos. Now, in single families, this is a little bit crazy, and I want to talk you through why this is what it is and what I expect to see from it. But our months of inventory, again, how long would it take? How many months would it take for us to sell all single family homes if no new ones came to the market? At this rate, based on selling about 10 to 12 per month, it would take us 8 months, which firmly puts us on the buyer's side of the fence. 6 months of inventory is neutral market. As I touched on in a previous video, new construction makes up roughly 50% of all of the available single family homes. Those tend to sit longer. They tend to be higher price points. So it doesn't surprise me that the single family world is growing in inventory much more than the condo is, not just in a sheer number standpoint, but in a percentage standpoint as well. And also, we've been moving, again, roughly the same amount of single family homes per month back for several years. So this, I would expect to stay where it is. This is not a fluke, but ultimately, it's going to depend on the market, on the buyers to say enough is enough for any prices to really come down. And there are still a lot of new construction homes that are going under contract. But what's becoming more important now, and this is not just in single family, condo world too, we're getting back to that tried and true location piece. Over the past 2 years, I think sellers got very, very used to, and buyers seem to kind of throw it by the wayside, just how important that really is. There were a lot of properties that sold at or above what they probably should have in the frenzy of everything. That's not happening anymore. Even if it's a nice new construction home, right, and it's reasonably priced, if the location's not great, if the amenities aren't great, and by that I mean pool or elevator, primarily, what if it's on Bay Avenue, if it's on West Avenue? Some of them are still going, but a lot aren't. So it's going to be interesting to track and see what happens with those. I firmly believe there's going to be some opportunity over the next 12 months in that new build space if some of these don't start to sell, because the developers aren't going to hold them forever. And eventually some may have to cut their losses. So if you're looking for a new build, let me know. I'll put you on a list because I'm tracking these things on a daily basis, and I can let you know when I think might be the right time to strike on some of those opportunities. Now, in terms of median price, I'm not going to spend any time on this because it's still going upwards. Again, pretty straightforward there. Now, days on market, again, we're starting to see a spike there, and it's correlating with our total months of inventory. So these homes are sitting longer. It's taking a lot more effort to sell some of these. Some of that's, again, price reductions. Some of that is other incentives that some sellers are providing to buyers to get this done. So I would expect that we start to see these trend back towards what was normal, right? What was in the mid 60s, 70s for these single family homes. They are more expensive. It does take a lot more for somebody to be able to afford one of those, especially if we're talking in the $3+ million range, where a lot of the nicer and newer single families tend to be priced. So expect days on market to keep going up there for singles. For condos, we're seeing a similar type of rise in our total months of inventory, but to a lesser extent, right? We're still sub 5. We're about 4.4, if I remember it right. Condos are always going to be in higher demand than single family homes, not because people don't want singles, but because of, number one, lack of inventory of singles that are, number two, affordable. So when it comes to buying in Ocean City, price is the primary driver for most people. And unfortunately, when your budget is at a certain point and you want what you want, sometimes you have to give up the privacy of a single family home to get that location, to get the condition, the number of bedrooms that you want. So condos are continually moving, whereas, again, singles are starting to add up inventory-wise. Now, again, we're still increasing here. It looked like we were smoothing out for several months there. We have another jump here. Now, will this change as a result of the 12-ish condos that should be closed in the MLS? Maybe, and I will make sure that I give you an update. midway through the month of December, just in case anything major changed. If nothing changed, it'll just be a quick post, nothing really to write home about, but I'll make sure I keep you guys in the loop on what we're seeing. Now, days on market, this is a total opposite of what we saw in single family. These are still staying very, very low. Again, the demand is there. Now, one thing that I want to talk about before we really dive in category by category here, and I do touch on this in the price section here, so I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I think it's important to get this out of the way. There are some areas of town, some types of properties, again, the ones that need some work, that are in a subpar location, where the prices are starting to come down. Now, they haven't reflected in these statistics and in the data yet because a lot of them haven't closed. But with the relationships that I have with other agents on the island, especially, I'm aware that a lot of these properties, West Avenue territory primarily, where the prices are coming down, where homes are going under contract a good bit sometimes under the list price, or the list price actually started at what is a reasonable price and it moved quickly because of that price. So I would expect that prices start to slightly fall in the coming months. I'm not saying a crash is coming. I'm not saying, oh, the sky is falling, but there's going to be an adjustment there, specifically with the condos in less desirable areas. I think the single family market, again, the statistics say that there should be some pressure on those to start coming down, given the months of available inventory. But it comes down to selection more than almost anything else. And the selection, despite there being almost 100 single family homes out there, which is a great number, a lot of them are in that very, very high end range. So if there's a reasonable option that comes in around $1 million, it's still going to go very quickly. Now, let's get back to mortgage rates here. Mortgage rates are all over the place and nobody knows what's going to happen. They're sitting around 6.5 now. It's down, like I mentioned at the beginning of this, from over 7. I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic, that they'll stay in the 6s. If the Fed does something a little bit crazy in December's meeting, there's a chance that it does go back up above 7. But I think that's unlikely. Now, what 2023 brings is anybody's guess, but given the nature of how inflation is starting to trend, or at least the data on it, there's no deflation, right? Prices on anything are not going backwards, but they're no longer increasing at the same rate. And that's the whole Fed's goal, right? If they start to go deflationary, and I'm no economist here, that would set off a whole lot of chaos. So I don't really think that's the goal. I think the goal is just to moderate inflation. And if that happens, which I don't think it will for a couple more years, but if and only if that happens, will rates start to come back down out of the 6s. So I think we're going to be here for the foreseeable future. Now, in terms of inventory, right, we fluctuated a bit throughout the month of November, and it was up and it was down, which is why if I were to release one of these every day, it would be, oh, we're up. Here's where I think we're going. Oh, no, we're down. Here's where I think we're going. We need to moderate this. So on a monthly or sometimes twice a month basis, if there's an update worth giving, is the most frequently that I'll be doing these, because I want to make sure that you get a clear picture of what's happening, not a disjointed one where you're getting pulled back and forth, or like a ping pong ball is a better analogy there. So I think we're going to have a pretty sticky situation here in inventory. I don't see us dropping a whole lot. We're not going 40% by January like we did last year. I think we are likely to get a decrease, but I think we'll still be in the upper 2s. If we hit 250, I think that'd be a pretty good thing. But if we go above where we are, right, and things really start to reverse, I want to make sure that you're the first to know. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe down below and that little bell, because I put out videos on Ocean City real estate every week. And if there's a sign of anything coming, you will want to make sure you're among the first to know so you don't get caught in any of the bad side of change. So prices we did cover. Now, days on market, again, we're starting to see the divergence between single family and condos. So I would expect that condos will still stick about where they are, but single family, I think, will still continue to trend upwards. Now, if you have any questions, whether that is, what the heck are you talking about? What are these numbers? Or if you have questions about a property, or if you want to pick my brain about the values that are out there, and there are values, I promise you, I'm up to at least more than 5 fingers worth of values, which is the most I've felt confident about in a long time. Reach out to me any of these ways. I'm happy to talk you through what these values are. I can't advertise them because they're not my listings. I got my wrist slap for that, rightfully so. So I'd be happy to talk you through it one-to-one if there's anything that would fit what you're looking for. Whether now or in the future, I'm happy to be your boots on the ground. So thanks for hanging out with me as always, and I will see you on the next video.